we're back to share our picks / bets against the spread for Week 15 of the NFL season. Right there. Only 4 weeks left in this regular season, and still a lot to go over in regards to playoffs. A lot of things are still up in the air, and obviously we'll see that become more clear as the season goes on. In regards to standings wise, and such, in regards to the money, once again, air quotes around money, not real money, thank goodness, because last week we were both in the negatives. You were negative 360, and I was negative 320. So overall in the season, that negative 360 doubled your amount going into the game for the season. You're at negative 360 going to the week last week, so now you're at negative 720 overall money wise, and then I'm way further back as I am minus 3,500. So yeah, thanks Dolphins for blowing that one because you put 200 on them, I put 500 on them last week, and I mean obviously both of Monday night's games really screwed us because you had 500 total, you had 300 on the Packers, I had 100 on the Packers, and yeah, we lost. That's where we lost most of our money. And then in regards to overall record wise, though, a little bit of I'm afraid the phrase, but a little more encouraging, at least for me, because last week you went 6-9, I went 8-7. You had a couple of tough weeks, so now I'm only 6 games behind you, John. John is 97 wins, 111 losses against the spread, and I am at 91 wins and 117 losses, so 6 games behind. Who knows? Maybe I can make some room there. Money, who knows? It's not looking great. I really need a hit on my bets. So, nonetheless, how you feeling before we start Week 15?
I mean, I know that like money wise I'm fine, but I've definitely like every time the weeks have kind of gone on, I've looked at my picks and I don't know, I feel like the last handful of weeks, like week 10 I had a good week, but I don't know, it feels like I've had some rough weeks for quite a while now with just like a couple decent ones. So I'm hoping I can get back in the green because I feel like I've taken a lot more risks as the season has gone on, thinking that certain teams might like kind of get it together, and then they just haven't. So this week I'm just kind of playing it a little bit more safe.
All right, so yeah, we'll see how it goes. And once again, we always make all the picks against the spread as I got from the Lions.com. They get like from MGM, DraftKings. They can't have all 5. So all 4 or 5 like major betting sites. So, once again, not real money because we're not crazy, and yeah, we would be in terrible shape. But nonetheless, got a full slate of games going forward. No more bye weeks, and this week a little bit interesting. So make sure to check your dates if you're doing fantasy and such. First, we'll start with, as always, a Thursday night game, and this one definitely falls in the list of doozies for Thursday nighters, as it is the Las Vegas Raiders at home at Las Vegas. They are favored by 3.5 points, hosting the LA Chargers. Important to note, obviously, since the Chargers are not favored, big reason why, no Justin Herbert and no Keenan Allen for this game as well. So what are your thoughts here, John, and who you taking for how much?
Well, first off, for fantasy, this sucks for me because I have Keenan Allen in a lot of leagues, and I have Justin Herbert in the big money league we got. So that sucks for me because I'm in the playoffs in that one, and I got to bench both. But I am taking the Raiders. I said it last week, and this was with those two guys healthy. I just don't really trust the Chargers at this point to be competent, and that sucks because I felt like this team had a lot of high expectations considering how good they were last year and how they were able to make the playoffs, and they didn't get the result they wanted, but they almost beat the Jaguars in that wild card round game if it wasn't for the complete collapse they had, and so they could have very well gone the divisional round, and who knows, because with the NFL playoffs, obviously the better teams typically come out on top, but sometimes it's a matchup game, and I feel like the Chargers last year could have matched up well against specific teams. And now here we are where they're just so unreliable that I'm picking the Raiders. I don't know who the quarterback is for either team is right now. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Easton Stick, but for the Raiders at least, The interim coach didn't answer who the quarterback was going to be because I think Jimmy G is back from injury, and so is Brian Hoyer. So there's potential that O'Connell could get benched. Regardless of that, I just simply believe in the Raiders' ability to just pound the rock with Josh Jacobs more. I believe in their ability to get the ball to Devontae Adams, and those two guys I think can be difference makers, as well as Max Crosby. Where for the Chargers, Herbert's out, Keenan Allen's out. All of a sudden, you're going to have Easton Stick or Max Duggan. Once again, I'm assuming it's Easton Stick, but I haven't really read on who the starter is going to be. Your receiver core is completely decimated to the point where it's just Quentin Johnston, and I think maybe Josh Palmer comes back because he's eligible to come off IR, but I don't know if they actually activated him. It's getting so bad for the Chargers that by default I'm kind of just taking their opponents at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not going to add much more to what you mentioned. I mean, yeah, Chargers are just kind of in a free fall. Another week on the watch of, is this the week that they let go of Brand Staley, or maybe they're pulling like some of the other teams are. They're just going to wait to the end of the season, write it out, and then let them go kind of gracefully. I don't know, but yeah, at least the Raiders, you're at home, got a little bit more. They got a little more right now pride to play for. I know neither team really has much to play for, but at least the Raiders have had a little bit of momentum recently in regards to some wins, and most of those guys, and they're still trying to figure out, obviously coaching stuff, but what personnel maybe they want to keep for the next regime. So that's obviously a big motivation for the Raiders and such. So we're both going Las Vegas Raiders, both in agreement. We're both putting 100 on them. So we're both putting the standard on the Raiders. I wouldn't be shocked if that's, if not the biggest, or tied for the biggest bet that we put on the Raiders all season. I'll have to go back and check.
I mean, it's just, once again, that's how bad the Chargers have gotten at this point.
Exactly. So how the mighty have fallen, or not so mighty, because the Chargers, have always been on the cusp with Herbert for the last few years, but they haven't really ascended to that. And it seems like they couldn't hang on, and now they have to do a little bit of a relaunch / restart here in the offseason. But now we go to Saturday, because we're starting some Saturday games. That's what I mentioned. A little bit different this week. We got 3 Saturday games. First one, which this one would have been great if the quarterbacks are healthy. Once again, another game where the day one starters are not present, and it is the Cincinnati Bengals at home. They are favored by 2.5 points, hosting the Minnesota Vikings. As I just mentioned, quarterback-wise, it's going to be Jake Browning, obviously, for the Bengals, and Vikings did mention that it is going to be Nick Mullins as their starter for this game. Looks like we'll still have Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, so that's 2 guys that were teammates in college and such, and obviously dynamic receivers now. But John, who do you have here, and for how much?
Short and simple, I'm taking the Bengals. They've looked really good the last few weeks with Jake Browning at quarterback. I think they have very clearly, obviously in the past, during the Zach Taylor era with Joe Burrow has missed time. So they've been through this before, and I think it showed that experience of having to be ready with a backup quarterback, having a plan for how to make things work. And with Jake Browning, it's worked. Things have been looking great. I'm not going to say that they're the same offense, but they're finding ways to get their playmakers the ball and just allow them to do what they do, whether that's Chase Brown last week, whether that's Jamar the week before, T. Higgins, whoever. So I'm taking the Bengals for the standard 100. With the Vikings, the QB change, I just don't know how confident I necessarily feel in Nick Mullins yet. Not that he's the worst, because we saw in San Francisco he was able to do some things, and he's been serviceable at times throughout his career. But with the Vikings, their offense, I know that a lot of people would maybe want to say oh yeah, it's all on Josh Dobbs, but it's not like Nick Mullins is some superstar. And the fact that their offense was that bad last week makes me think that there's some larger problems that are not just related to the QB position. Maybe other teams have kind of figured out their offensive play calling. I've never really loved the run game. And Justin Jefferson, although he is back, he got re-injured in the middle of the game last time, and who knows what happens this week. Not saying that he's going to get injured, knocking on wood, but I don't know. There's just too many question marks about Minnesota to where Cincinnati, like I said, they've kind of proven that they can still be incredibly competitive against very good teams with Jake Browning. So standard 100.
I'm in complete agreement. I'm also going with the Bengals for 100. Only other real points I want to add on to what you mentioned are Cincinnati defense. we saw last week, they still are very good. They are pretty good. I know they've been up and down this year, and you already mentioned how the offense has kind of just figured it out how to survive and operate without Burrow. And yeah, I mean, especially since, and you hit on it, Minnesota being so one dimensional. And it is Nick Mullins. I want people to remember too. Like, yeah, Nick Mullins had some good moments. He also had some terrible moments where he made some, and I don't mean to be this harsh. It's just the best word I can describe. Just dumb decisions. Just so I was like, what are you seeing there, dude? I mean, I remember against Green Bay, it was a close game, but then he threw like a pick six. He's one of those quarterbacks where it's like he's gonna be due for a turnover or two that kind of just unfortunately screws up the rest of the game. You can have a great game otherwise, but two very costly turnovers tend to be an issue for him, and it is Cincinnati defense that loves to be aggressive and do that. So, yeah, I'm going with the Bengals also. We are in complete agreement thus far in terms of our picks and money. Once again, we both go for the Bengals for the standard 100 for the early Saturday game. Let's go on to the next one, as it is the Indianapolis Colts. They're going to be at home, favored by 1.5 points, hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. Colts in the playoffs as of right now, per standings, and I'm pretty sure Pittsburgh is either on the outside looking in right behind them, or still somehow the Steelers are still there. So both these teams are the 6 and 7 wildcard teams as of right now. So they're very important game for them for their survival in that. Who do you have here, and for how much?
Well, I'm going to go with the Pittsburgh Steelers. These are two teams that I have said I don't really have the greatest of feels for. And so I'm reverting back to my my old method of just taking the Steelers when they're the underdogs. I don't know if it's actually been working this year. It's just kind of my tried and true formula with the Steelers whenever I have no clue what to do. So that's what I'm doing. I think their defense can keep it relatively close. Jonathan Taylor is still expected not to play in this one, so it is going to be Zach Moss. The offense has been decent for the Colts, but I don't think it's really lit the world on fire, and so I feel like the Steelers can at least keep it relatively close, and I don't know, maybe they bounce back out of desperation because both teams have a lot on the line in terms of potential wild card implications. So, yeah, I'm going to take Tomlin and the Steelers on this one for the standard 100.
This is a tough game, I think, to bet spread indicate wise. And this is where we're gonna have our first disagreement. I'm going with the Colts here for 10. I have a little bit more confidence in their offense because it looks like it's gonna be another Mitch Trubisky week. I think we saw last week. I mentioned with Nick Mullins, it's definitely a thing with Mitch Trubisky, dicey decision making, and like Pittsburgh's offense, like we mentioned, Pittsburgh has to. The game cannot get away from Pittsburgh into double digits, or else it seems like they're screwed. And I know last week was not a good showing for the Colts defense, but once again, like I mentioned, they went up against Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's defense is still really good. It's playoff worthy, and I just feel like Indianapolis offense, they'll get back on track a little bit this week against a Pittsburgh Steelers defense that is solid but not amazing, especially not really at one thing. And then on the flip side, like I mentioned, I just don't trust Pittsburgh's offense at this moment. And although Indy's defense has been suspect, they are relatively solid at creating turnovers, and yeah, I just think that Trubisky is due for 1 or 2, like it was last week. I just don't have much faith in him to take care of the ball the way Pittsburgh needs to win games, like Kenny Pickett was. So that's our first disagreement. John putting 100 on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm only going 10 on the Indianapolis Colts because I am still afraid of the Steeler factor, like you're mentioning, them as underdogs. Who knows? So there's our first disagreements of the week, and I'm sure it won't be our last as we head on to the final game on Saturday. It is the Detroit Lions at Detroit. They are favored by 3.5 points, hosting the Denver Broncos. These two teams kind of trending in opposite ways in recent weeks. Detroit's kind of been on a little bit of a free fall, a couple of bad losses, while Denver's continue to pile up some solid wins and have gotten themselves in the playoff picture. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm going Denver for 100. I feel like stylistically, I don't know. I just kind of like this one for Denver a little bit more. Once again, like you said, Detroit, they're starting to get a little bit more exposed, and the fact that Chicago was able to kind of do it twice kind of to me feels like, one, a lack of adjustment from the Lions coaching staff, but also the Chicago coaching staff, which I don't really rate that highly, being able to clearly find the weaknesses and expose them multiple times, on top of some of the other teams that have kind of been doing it recently as well. So I just don't feel that confident in Detroit right now. I'm sure that maybe they can prove me wrong, but I really expected to bounce back against both the Packers and the Bears. And so this could just be me getting a little bit scared of getting burned again, because it was 2 weeks in a row that I took the Lions and they burned me. But I'm taking Denver for the standard 100.
Alrighty. Well, I'm going with Detroit here for 10. It would be a very interesting matchup, of course. I just feel like with Detroit, like momentum, like something's got to break. I feel like they're going to be extra motivated to kind of get a bounce back, especially at home. And although Denver's defense has been really good the past few weeks, or really past couple of months, ever since that terrible Miami game, that seemed to have gotten them to right the ship there. I do worry about them handling Detroit's size on their offensive line. I just feel like this might be a day where Dan Campbell's like, hey, we're gonna run the ball. We're just gonna lean on our strength and we're gonna make it ugly. And I think Detroit may be able to have success in that range. Take the ball more out of Jared Goff's hands in terms of that sense. And on the flip side, while I am still worried about Detroit's defense overall, like Denver, still a solid offense. I'm just not sure if they're going to be able to be aggressive and take advantage of Detroit's weaknesses in the secondary, as they're more of a ball control kind of dig and dunk. Okay, we'll take a couple of shots here and there type team. So yeah, I'm just kind of banking on Detroit bouncing back. But once again, the amount that I'm putting it on shows my low confidence, as I'm only putting 10, the minimum, on the Lions to cover that 3.5 point spread, while John has put 100 on the Broncos to keep it within 3 or pull off the upset there, or the upset in Detroit. So those are the Saturday games, those 3. Let's move on over to the regularly scheduled Sunday games. Gonna start with the Battle of the Bays, or if I remember, they used to call it Battle of the Pigs. Anyway, Packers at home, favored by 3.5, hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Both these teams, I mean, obviously Tampa fighting for their division, but both these teams in that wild card race in the NFC also. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm taking Tampa. I think it's going to be a close game, and I don't really have a true feel either way. But honestly, I just feel like the 3.5 felt a little bit big for me. If it was 3, then I might get a little bit on board. If it was 2.5, then I might feel a bit more on board. But like I said, the fact that I think it's a close game, I'm thinking if Green Bay wins, it's by a field goal. If Tampa wins, it's by a field goal, because I feel like stylistically they both kind of match up well. But I do worry about the Rachaad White factor, because Tampa does love to give Rachaad a lot of touches. And I feel like that's kind of the one thing that Green Bay has consistently struggled with, has been stopping the run. And so, yeah, I'm going to take Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 100.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very valid concern. I'm also personally concerned as a Packer fan, like especially if it's likely no Jair again. Like, how are we going to guard Chris Godwin and Mike Evans? Because they've been, as you mentioned, it's always been one or two, either or. Hell, who knows? With our luck, it's probably both. But that kind of go off, and I already mentioned we're kind of at the end of our depth chart in regards to our corners. They've been okay, but obviously not talented enough that I would trust them to guard those guys, and then because they may have to if we get compromised in the run against Rachaad White. But on the flip side, Tampa Bay's defense has just been very disappointing. I feel like they've been a little bit too over aggressive at times, and who knows, maybe age is starting to factor in some of the core pieces, like Shaq Barrett have gone older, been dealing with some injuries, so maybe that's the reason as to it. But I just feel like this could be a get-right game for the Packers offense. Obviously, Monday night was not a great night, especially at the start. I mentioned some bobbled balls, that could have been catches. And then Love was also a little bit off, on some throws as well. So the rhythm of the offense was not good. And I would expect, especially at home, and stronger, just an emphasis after losing a game that we probably should have won last week. I feel like there'd be a correction game for the Packers, and they'll probably be able to take advantage of some of the Bucs being over aggressive on defense, trying to go and check and see the status on Christian Watson as of right now, but I'm not getting any clear. He was a non-participant as of Wednesday, so who knows? So hopefully he is back, because the offense is much better with him, as it's shown in that little win streak that we had. But nonetheless, I'm going with the Packers for 50 to cover, while John is going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the underdog, to at least keep it within 3 and or win, and he's putting 100 on the Buccaneers. So once again, we got a little different streak going on here, unintentionally, of course, but let's see if it'll continue, as now we head on over to the AFC South, going to Tennessee, as the Titans are favored by 2.5 points, hosting the Houston Texans. This is tough for us because as of right now, once again, it's Wednesday, so we don't know if at least the status on CJ Stroud, which feels like a huge factor. It is a huge factor for this game. It feels like Vegas doesn't know either, of course, at this time. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm taking Houston. I'm only putting 10 because of the CJ Stroud thing. If he's there, I feel like the line swings big time, which is why I'm picking them, because of the possibility. And if he's not there, then they're the underdog, so at least I have that going for me. But the risk overall is why I'm not going to put more than 10, because if he's not there, then things could get ugly really fast.
Yeah, I'm very worried about that. And even then, I think we kind of saw, I know it was a really good Jets defense last week, but I think Tennessee's smart enough where they may realize, hey, like, we don't, especially if it's no Nico Collins still, who knows his status as well. That could be up in the air, and they've had some injuries on the O-line and defense. Just feels like a little bit of a, I won't say trap game, but like an avalanche game for Houston, where they lost last week. It was a tough loss, and then dealing with injuries. Like, it's one loss turns into two. Just unfortunate timing. So I'm baking there. And then also Tennessee, riding some momentum recently with Will Levis, and the offense has at least looked somewhat competent. I mean, they were able to make a crazy comeback on Monday nights, and yeah, Houston defense has been a little suspect in recent weeks and times, and like I mentioned, potentially some injuries there to like Will Anderson and such. So yeah, I just feel like this is a game where Tennessee, pride win for them, and also, hey, we in regards to Tennessee, like, I'm sure they're probably thinking, hey, we have a chance here to not knock out Houston mathematically, but really put them behind the 8 ball, and in regards to the race for the playoffs. Because if Houston loses, and a couple of these other teams that are right with them at 7-6 lose, then all of a sudden, yeah, like I mentioned, Houston's needs a lot to happen for them, and on top of taking care of their own business. So I'm going with Tennessee to cover the 2.5 points as a favorite, while John's going with Houston, the underdog. Again, so we have a little bit of trend there in regards to that. I think, yeah, really, I've picked 4 straight favorites. You picked 4 straight underdogs in our difference here. So, but obviously with this, we're both only putting 10, so it's like very minimal confidence here. Either way, obviously with the CJ Stroud injury up in the air at the time of recording. So, let's move on over to the AFC East, where it is the Miami Dolphins. They are at home, fresh off that tough Monday night loss to the Titans. They're at home, favored by 8.5, hosting the New York Jets. Jets coming out that recent win under Zach Wilson. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to go with the Jets. This could be a mistake, because I'm pretty sure the line might have been somewhat similar the last time these two teams played, and this was in New York, and I'm pretty sure I picked the Jets, and then I was really disappointed that Miami absolutely kind of just had their way with their defense. But I just don't think that the Jets defense is going to have a performance like that again. I mean, both Waddle and Tyreek Hill had over 100 yards last time they played. Raheem Mostert had 2 touchdowns. Like, the playmakers for Miami had monster days against a team that is one of the best defenses in the league. And so it's not that I think the Jets are necessarily capable of scoring more than they did last time. It's that I think the defense is going to really want to have a far better performance than they did the first time these two teams matched up. Now, it is on the road, so you're going into hostile territory, but who knows, maybe that amps them up even a little bit more, hearing, the opposing team's fans coming at you. So I'm taking the Jets. I don't think they necessarily win the game. They could, because we saw, like, Miami looked vulnerable on Monday night, but yeah, I just think the defense is going to have a far better performance than last time, so I think they cover. and I'm putting only 10 because I still feel
The
iffy.
Jets. Yeah. Hey, and I'm right with you. Literally, I'm putting 10 on the Jets as well. I think it's important to note, you mentioned that previous matchup. That was the Tim Boyle first start, and it did not go well at all. I mean, sacked 7 times, 2 interceptions. And they really didn't do much on offense. I mean, even one of their touchdowns was garbage time, like literally at the end of the game. So I would expect a little bit better showing from their offense. We mentioned that, yes, Zach Wilson is at least a little bit more dynamic in terms of his arm and his legs to help generate some extra, at least a little bit of offense. That extra couple of maybe first downs he gets or yards are big, and as long as he takes care of the ball, which he relatively has, like, listen, he hasn't been amazing once again, but he's taking care of the ball for the most part as the quarterback there this year. So yeah, and then also Miami too. We saw last week. I'm sure the Jets may look into see how Tennessee was able to slow down Miami, because as we mentioned in the previous pod, like really statistically, Miami's offense didn't have those explosive numbers that they did last week. I don't know, Tarek was in and out, but even still, like, they were just lesser than, and we've had concerns throughout the year. We had just questions because last year we saw in December, Dolphins, more tape on the Dolphins, more inclement weather. The weather at least slows down the speed of this team, and then also teams figuring out kind of what you like to do. A big issue. So listen, I expect the Dolphins to win, and I'm sure you do too, but I think the Jets at least keep it close. Definitely a pride one. They're still somewhat fighting for their playoff hopes and chances with maybe Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, nonetheless, we're both going Jets 4-10 to cover that 8.5 points against the Dolphins. So we'll see if they can do so. And hey, maybe they pull off the upset as well. But nonetheless, we are in agreement. Let's go on over a lot of divisional matchups, because this next one is as well. Going to our favorite division, though, the NFC South, as it is the Atlanta Falcons. They are favored by 2.5 points, going to Carolina to play the Panthers. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am not making the same mistake I did last week, and who knows, maybe it comes back to bite me, but I'm taking Atlanta. I'm going to put 50 on them. It's just Carolina's bad. That's kind of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say this too, because I'm going to Atlanta. I'm putting 10 on them. At least Atlanta has more playmakers on offense. That I know it's a big iffy. Hey, can Arthur Smith give them the ball enough? But yeah, I mean, they just have them, and at least give them the ball a little bit, as opposed to Carolina, like we mentioned, where they really don't have any playmakers on offense, and it's an offensive-driven league. You need some guys that can do more than just the X's and O's, and they literally have no one. No offense to all those guys, but it's just they're in that weird stage right now, unfortunately, roster-wise. So we're both going Falcons. Keep that one cut and dry, and who knows, maybe the Panthers surprise us and get their second win of the season, but unlikely. But now let's move on up north to Cleveland, where the Cleveland Browns are at home. It's going to be Joe Flacco at quarterback. They are favored by 3.5 points, hosting the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm going to go with Cleveland. They've looked really good with Joe Flacco. The offense has been moving. He showed that his ability to get Amari Cooper and David Njoku pretty heavily involved has been good. Elijah Moore as well. So, yeah, I honestly, I like the Cleveland passing attack. They feel like they have some stability finally, which is not surprising because Joe Flacco, I mean, the guy's been playing in the NFL for so long. Like, if there was any guy that out there that could probably just come in and do its thing, it was Joe Flacco, because let's not forget like what he did with the Jets last year and some of these other teams that he's kind of been able to fill in over the years. So, and, he's a Super Bowl champion. So, anyway, I'm taking the Browns. I like what the Bears have been doing with Justin Fields, but at the same time, I don't know if I'm just maybe fooling myself into the Bears because of the Detroit Lions, which is kind of like the bulk of the Justin Fields work since he's returned from injury. So I'm going to take Cleveland and play it safe because their defense is reliable. The offense has been solid, and they have a lot on the line. Once again, we're talking about the playoffs and wild card and all this kind of stuff. They're not even technically out of the race for their division. So if the Baltimore Ravens falter a little bit here, and the Browns can maybe strike, there's even a possibility they could be going into the playoffs as one of the first 4 seeds. So I think they're going to want to take advantage of the opportunity and at least give them that chance to be in that spot come the very end of the season, and hope that Baltimore can maybe drop one.
Yeah, I'm going with Cleveland also. Also putting 50 as well. Yeah, you mentioned Flacco. I mean, the issue hasn't always we've seen he still has a solid arm. May not be what it was, like he was when he was win the Super Bowl and such with Baltimore, but still a good arm. Obviously, I don't think the weather would be too much a factor. Obviously, the only issue for him is always just, especially in later in his career, not very mobile. But the way the Browns play, it works. A lot of some play action and just involved. They're a run first team. They like to be that way. And yeah, you mentioned their defense too. I just feel like obviously I don't think they're gonna let DJ Moore absolutely kill them like we've seen like the Lions. They don't really have anyone that can match up with them. Browns do. They have a couple of corners they can throw at him. Obviously with Denzel Ward, so they can throw a mix there. And then even if it is, especially if it is inclement weather, and regardless, like you mentioned, you said overall, just Cleveland's defense feels like it's a really good matchup for them. I think they'll be able to contain Justin Fields in the run game there, and yeah, just hold down DJ Moore. And it may not be pretty, but I feel like they'll eventually start pulling away as long as Joe Flacco takes care of the ball on offense, which for the most part he has, and he also has been aggressive when he's needed to be as well. Like you mentioned with him still finding Amari Cooper, getting David Njoku involved in recent weeks too, has been a surprise but a pleasant one for the Browns. So we are in complete agreements there. As I mentioned, both picking Cleveland to cover the 3.5 points and both putting 50 on the Browns to do so. Now let's go on down to New Orleans, where the Saints are at home. They are favored by 5.5 points, hosting the New York Giants. New Orleans in more favorable position, but both these teams still technically in the hunt, potentially for the playoffs. Obviously, New Orleans still in contention for their division title. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
By the way, breaking news out of the NBA: Draymond Green suspended indefinitely. If anyone saw the clip of him against the Suns, you'll understand why. But indefinitely is kind of crazy.
Yeah, we're gonna do an NBA pod soon. But it seems like a topic we'll definitely we'll see obviously what happens. Maybe who knows, maybe he'll still be suspended by the time we get to that one. But honestly, regards to that, it's like I'm not shocked because at some point it's like, come on, dude, like repeat offender, especially a recent repeat offender.
He is a many time repeat offender.
Especially this year. Like remember, like even this calendar year, like going back into playoffs, he stepped on Sabonis, and then obviously a couple weeks ago he put Rudy Gobert in the headlock. Like literally a minute into the game, and then obviously this one happened. So we'll see. Like I said, maybe he should be out here playing football. I don't know, but maybe the Saints or Giants can maybe use him. But nonetheless, who do you have here?
I'm going with the Giants. I like what they've done defensively. I think that offensively they'll do enough to kind of keep him in the game. And honestly, I feel like the Saints and Giants are kind of the same team almost. Like, I don't really love the passing attack. They got good running backs who are sort of at the tail end of their primes, who I think they're going to rely on offensively. And I like what they have on the defensive side. So I just feel like they kind of match up well. They're kind of the same. Obviously, the Saints have more on the line because of how bad their division is. Like, they're fighting for a playoff spot, where the Giants are, I guess, not technically out of it. Like, they could make the playoffs, but it's very unlikely considering they're going to have to go play the Eagles twice at the end of the year. So they're kind of just playing for pride. But regardless, I don't know. I just feel like I said, they just kind of match up well, that the 5.5 feels slightly too big. So I'm going to take the Giants here. And I'm only putting 30, though, because I don't know. I don't really like betting on the Giants never makes me feel confident.
Bet on Tommy Cutlets. Anyway, I'm going the opposite way. I'm going with New Orleans. I personally feel like I at least have more confidence in their structure of the roster. I know it's been disappointing in terms of the results. But I feel like especially at home, could get Rashid Shaheed back, so he will add possibly an explosive element to their offense. And I will say, as Derek Carr hasn't been great, but at least he's been taking care of the ball. And as I mentioned with the Packer game last week, like with the Giants, especially their defense, like their style of play is just they want you to make the mistakes more than they can, and they'll just hang around. I feel like New Orleans would be good for them as a confidence game. I think in regards to the New Orleans defense, still solid. I don't think they're gonna let Saquon the run game get going. And once again, like we kind of mentioned, like I don't think any of the receivers really scare them. And I think I would say their secondary is better than Green Bay's is at this point. So I don't suspect that they'll let up some of those chunk plays that in key moments that the Packers did last week. Although I am concerned because it's been a kind of recent history with New Orleans. They do have a tendency to just be poor in regards to QB contained and mobile quarterback. So that could be a thing to worry about. Is DeVito running for a few first downs or some key moments, keeping plays alive. But yeah, my confidence is extremely low as I'm only putting 10 on the Saints, while John, you're putting 30 on the Giants. So it is a difference for us. It's just not going to be an earth-shattering one, at least in regards to the money, as it's a 40 differential there. I guess dollar. I don't know. I keep wondering if I should say dollar because it's fake money. Nonetheless, it's a 40 quote unquote dollar difference there between us. So we'll see. And that, it's ironically enough, that uneventful game will have some meaning for the both of us there. Not fantasy wise. I don't think I have any fantasy. Well, I have Alvin Kamara, so never mind. I'm actually depending on that. I almost forget. He's literally the only Saint I own at all. I don't own any Giants at all in any of the leagues. I'm sure you don't either. So
no, I don't draft Giants players.
Okay. So anyhow, let's go on over to the Chiefs, where the Chiefs coming off a couple of tough losses. We saw Mahomes kind of boil over. He cooled off. It seemed like walked back some of his comments and apologized for them. But nonetheless, Chiefs got to turn it around here as they are favored by 7.5 points, but they're going to New England. Patriots fresh off a confidence building win over the Steelers on Thursday night, plus had a couple of days to prepare, and we know that their defense is still pretty good. So question is, John, do you think they have any sort of shot, or do you think Kansas City covers here?
I'm taking the Chiefs. I definitely think that there is a surprise factor here with the Patriots because their defense has been good. And we can't ignore that Kansas City's offense definitely this year is not like the offense of old where they're guaranteed to put up 35 points. So there's a possibility the Patriots could keep this close. But honestly, I just feel like the Patriots are going to turn the ball over a few times. And I feel like if there's any team that's going to take advantage of those, it would be Kansas City. They'd find ways on short yardage, short field position to just put it in the end zone, especially considering how they lost last week to the Bills. It was very clearly an emotional loss considering, the penalty and all those kind of things. I think that they're going to want to come out here and it's not like they need a bounce back game because it's not like they're in some rut, but I think they're going to come out here and really execute because, they lost because of poor execution. That's kind of what happened at the end there. So yeah, I think they're going to play a clean game to where the Patriots are just so turnover prone and the Chiefs defense is pretty good that that part worries me. So I'm taking the Chiefs and I'm putting 300 on it. I feel pretty confident in Kansas City.
All right. Well, I'm the opposite just in terms of confidence. I'm going Kansas City with you. I'm only putting 10. I am afraid of it being an ugly 17-14-ish type game where New England, we've seen before, Bill Belichick isn't afraid to pull the water boy type deal, where he basically kneels the ball, oh, look at my new, making the other offense kind of beat them. I don't think it'd be that degree, but I think strong emphasis probably on the short passing game. Just, hey, let's just manage the game. Let's see if they, if they'll make mistakes. Like you mentioned, Chiefs have been pretty bad about some self-inflicting mistakes recently. So that worries me. I think they still win this, obviously, because Patriots offense, they need help regardless. They're going to need more than a couple of turnovers like we saw last week to get things going. And I just don't think Kansas City will let the game get away from them too much. And end of the day, it's still a bit of a talent difference between the two in regards to the Patriots and Chiefs. Obviously, Chiefs being superior one. So I'm going 10 just because I'm scared of the Patriots and their defense keeping this one close. But John, much more confident as you are going 300 on Kansas City to cover that 7.5 point spread. So let's move on over from the Northeast to the West Coast or not close to the West Coast, as we're going to see the San Francisco 49ers. They are favored by 12.5 points going to Arizona. Arizona coming off their bye week. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
The last time these two teams played, I took Arizona because this was in that phase at the beginning of the year where Arizona was they beat Dallas and then they were really competitive with Washington, with the Giants, with a lot of teams. And obviously, at this point, they got Kyler back, and they are coming off a bye week, so they could surprise. But I'm just not taking that risk again. I'm playing it safe. I'm taking the Niners. I'm only putting 50 because the 12.5 is big, and the Niners are kind of at a point in the year where they're looking towards the playoffs. They obviously want to secure the first round bye, and so I think they're just going to want to get the wins, get out of there. Like we don't care about the style points. We don't care about anything like that. Like, let's just get our win. Let's play a clean game. Let's get out of there. So who knows? Maybe that opens the door for a backdoor cover or something like that. But I still believe in San Francisco. But I'm only going to put 50 just because of how big that spread is.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I'm putting 50 on it in San Francisco also. Only thing I want to add is for a reason why I'm putting 50 and not more. We have seen, I know it was a different coaching staff regime, a long time ago, in regards to relatively like about a year or so ago when Kyler was starting. But Kyler has kind of given them issues just because of his mobility. Definitely slows down that pass rush a little bit. So, hey, maybe it makes the game a little bit closer. But I'm with you. I think definitely San Francisco wins. And, but just 10 million putting 50 just in case, because 12.5 is a lot. Could be a 17-point game. And, yeah, like you mentioned, San Francisco lets the foot off the gas pedal for the final, defensive drive, and Arizona scores a garbage time touchdown. We've seen it happen many times before. Or maybe they keep it a little bit close. Who knows? But, yeah, we're both on the same page as we both pick San Francisco for 50 to cover that 12.5-point spread over the Arizona Cardinals. Now we move on to LA for the Rams, where they are at home. They are favored by 6.5 points, hosting the Washington Commanders. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to go with the Rams. I'm going to put 200. Washington's not a great team. I do think that they can air it out and maybe keep up with the Rams, but the Rams are on a hot streak. I think they have their eyes set towards the playoffs. With Kyren Williams back, I've said it multiple times, but it just really feels like the offense, the identity is like there. Like a lot of these teams have kind of talked about, we don't really have an identity. I know that Philly has started to mention that recently. To where the Rams, with Kyren Williams back, the identity is very clear. We're going to run through Kyren Williams, and then we're going to get the ball out to Puka and Cooper Kupp, and then everything else after that kind of flows off of those two things. So, yeah, I feel like the Rams are just simply the better team here, and for that reason, I'm going 200. Also, Washington offensive line's really bad, and you got to play Aaron Donald. That's just always really scary.
Yeah, I want to start there because I'm also going with the LA Rams. I'm just going to say this. I'm putting 800 on it. Like, this is I need to start making ground. This is the game that I'm putting it on. You mentioned that one, too.
If anyone was doing the math leading up to this, you're like, all right, where are all those points going?
All the money's got to go there. Yeah, if you would follow along, like that, you're like, okay, at some point, there's got to be a big bet here from Aaron, or he just did his math wrong. But no, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I put 800. But, I worry about that because Washington, and it does scare me off the bye, but Washington, at least going into it, their offense has been very pass heavy for the most part because they've been behind in games, and even in games where they've it's been competitive, they've still been leaning more on the pass game. And as good as Sam Howell's been, like we've mentioned, I feel like I've said it a bunch. Like he's one of those guys right now, still young, so I'm not going to hold it too much on him, and obviously not a great roster, but still prone to a critical mistake or two. And that's not good against the Rams, obviously, not good in the NFL in general. But that, and then on the flip side, we've mentioned it before, like they cannot cover number one receiver, and you have to cover Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. On top of, like you mentioned, there's balance now for the Rams in regards to Kyren Williams, being as reliable a bell cow running back, and also him, they every now and then give him a couple of creative screens or short pass plays, and there's still Tutu Atwell as well. Just feels like a bad recipe for Washington and East Coast team going West Coast too. Like you just never know in regards to that, is like how that may affect them. And yeah, like we mentioned too, Rams still playing in the thick of the hunt, still playing for something in regards to playoff berth. I mean, they're still technically in. Double check. Like they are as of right now, technically in the playoffs. So even then, oh no, they're out. They're on the outs because I forget Green Bay has a tiebreaker over them. So yeah, I think they're gonna be definitely more motivated to keep their foot on the gas pedal and just keep themselves alive. So they I don't want to say screwed me, but they beat me week one when I put money on the Seahawks. I'm not sure if 800 is the most that we've had all year, but it's pretty up there in regards to a bet. So we'll see if the Rams can cash out for me, or if if I lose this one, it feels like if the Rams don't cover, I feel like that's kind of game over for me because literally half my budget for this week, and I need to, like I said, I got to start making some serious ground in regards to the money to catch up to John. So we'll see if the Rams can pull through for the both of us. John putting 200 on LA Rams, and like I just mentioned, I put 800, half of my budget on them to cover that 6.5 points over the Washington Commanders. But now let's move on over to probably one of the better games of the later slate on Sunday, and it is the Buffalo Bills at home at Buffalo, favored by 1.5 points, hosting your Dallas Cowboys. John, how you feeling about this one, and who you putting your money on?
I feel confident. It is going to be in Buffalo, and so, the Bills have that advantage, and they are coming off a hard-fought game where they beat the Chiefs. That said, I feel like Dallas is just on an absolute heater right now, confidence through the roof as everybody, they haven't beaten any teams with winning records. Well, they just beat Seattle, and then they just smacked around Philly, so they've gotten that off their back, and they've done it in a really impressive fashion. I have no doubts about their ability to score against Buffalo. The big question to me is, can Josh Allen and this offense keep up with them? And honestly, I think the answer is no. And I don't think that's an indictment of Josh, but I just don't really believe in the other playmakers being consistent. I think the X factor for Buffalo here might be Dalton Kincaid, but at the same time, it's not like tight ends have really shredded Dallas this year. So I don't know how much of an impact he has. I just feel like Stephon Diggs could be in for a rough day. Gilmore has been absolutely lights out as of recent. I remember against Seattle, DK Metcalf was kind of having his way against Ron Bland. At halftime, they switched Stephon Gilmore onto him, and boom, problem solved. Last week against A.J. Brown, A.J. Brown's apparently calling Gilmore old. He's talking trash. What happens? Well, Gilmore kind of locks him up. So, yeah, overall, I just feel like if they take away Diggs, and they don't have to fully take him away, they just kind of have to limit him, which many teams have surprisingly done this year. I just don't know how Buffalo is going to be able to consistently move the ball outside of like some stuff with James Cook, but I think that Dallas is athletic enough to cover that. So yeah, I'm going to take the Cowboys for 200. I feel very confident in my Cowboys right now.
This is going to be I think this is definitely going to be a fun game. Live up to the hype. I know I say that for every time. I feel like this one definitely will live up to it because it's an interesting matchup. You mentioned, Bills offense. I feel like though this kind of like the Seattle game you mentioned, there were some plays we had. Obviously, y'all made some adjustments, but I feel like Buffalo is maybe a good matchup for them, regardless of the fact that Dallas does you guys do like to play man at times, or for the most part, and I just feel like
almost always.
Yeah, so I just feel like Josh Allen. It plays to their strengths. For Josh, even if the X and the X and O's don't work, we know that he loves and he wants to extend plays, and then in man to man that can be tough. It's a good covering guy for additional couple of seconds too. So I feel like he's gonna have some opportunities there, and I think I'm adding in too, like Buffalo's I think is a little bit desperate right now. Like once again they got ground to make. They have to, they do not control their own destiny, even if they technically win out. I think so. Yeah, I think that's an important factor. Then on the flip side, while I'm not a huge fan of their run defense, I know Dallas's pass offense has kind of been the star more recently, and if anything, that's kind of a strength of Buffalo is scheming up zones to take away some of your tendencies. I just feel like they're going to kind of slow down. I don't think they'll shut down Dallas's offense. They've been clicking on all cylinders, but I think they may slow it down. Who knows the weather too? If it's a cold, inclement game, it's looking like it's going to be as of right now 36 degrees. So that may slow the game down a little bit for the Bills there. So yeah, I'm just kind of just hedging here in regards to I think Buffalo's a little bit more desperate team. Dallas, maybe I feel like could be resting on their laurels after some impressive wins, and then now you go to the Northeast and yeah, maybe you start off a little bit slow or something of the sort. So we'll see. I'm only putting 90 on the Bills because I like Dallas still amazing. Yeah, I'm not trying to poo-poo them, and I wouldn't be shocked though if they do pull off the win here. But I'm riding the Bills and their desperation factor here on mine. So John,
and I will say for your point too. I mean, I think that Josh Allen running could be a huge factor because when you play man, you know, you don't have a linebacker just kind of sitting there in a zone that could potentially step up, right?
Yeah.
Like there could be certain plays where everybody kind of clears out and Josh could maybe take off, and so that could be huge. And I mean, this is an underrated factor. It does apply to both teams, but as you mentioned, Buffalo's a little bit more desperate. Buffalo is chasing Miami, and Miami has to play Dallas as well. So if Buffalo can beat Dallas here, and then Dallas goes to Miami next week and is able to beat them, that's huge for Buffalo, not only because Miami loses, but that becomes a potential tiebreaker scenario where it's like, hey, we beat Dallas, you lost to Dallas, you know, common opponents, all that kind of stuff. So obviously Dallas also has that thing going for them because Philly did beat Buffalo and we have to play Buffalo. So we need to beat them for potential tiebreakers and all that. But I don't think Dallas is necessarily as desperate as Buffalo might be because Buffalo's still fighting to just make the playoffs, where Dallas is kind of just jockeying for positioning.
Yeah, so we'll see. And also important for Buffalo too, right? If they get this win and you all beat Miami, because Buffalo, I think if Buffalo does beat Miami in the last week of the season, I think they'd be 2-0 against Miami. So I'm sure if they do end up with a tied record, Buffalo might sneakily win the division potentially. So then who knows? You know what?
I mean, I'm gonna call my shot right now. I think the Bills are gonna win it. Just saying.
Win the division.
Just
Yeah, Miami does
saying.
have a tough stretch.
Miami, they got a tough stretch.
Yeah, so we'll see. Obviously, what happens here. But yeah, John going with his Cowboys, putting 200 on them to at least keep it within one because they're technically the underdogs here, or win. While I'm going 90 on the Bills. It's 1.5 points, so basically we're picking who's going to win. But watch it be a 1-point Buffalo win, and you still cover. So who knows? But anyhow, I'm not going to win two before I jinx that because I know neither of us really want that result. Anyhow, let's go on over to the Sunday night game. We talk about the AFC, race. These two teams are two critical pieces in that, as it is the top of the AFC. Baltimore Ravens are the favorites here, of course. Favored by 3.5 points, going to Jacksonville, who, as mentioned, Jacksonville leading their division, fourth right now in the AFC. So this could be a huge tilting moment if they can pull off the upset here. But who do you have, and for how much, John?
I am going with the Baltimore Ravens for 100. The Trevor Lawrence injury still concerns me, and last week, I don't know if it was because of the injury or what, but he just did not look great. I mean, 3 interceptions was pretty bad, and going against a Baltimore defense that is very good at forcing turnovers, that could be a factor again in this one. Baltimore also, we talked about teams controlling their own destiny. Baltimore controls it, so they're obviously looking to try and secure the first seed and get the bye. So I'm feeling pretty confident in Baltimore going into this week. Like I said, only stand at 100, but I do think that this is a game that they should win because Jacksonville has not looked like their usual self, even dating back to like that Bengals game in primetime when, they ended up losing. So they've been giving up a lot of points recently. Lamar and the offense should move it. And I do worry that maybe Jacksonville might stall out a couple times due to turnovers.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I'm going with Baltimore. I'm more confident though, money wise, as I'm putting 140 on the Ravens. Key point you mentioned, is that Jacksonville, their defense has been letting up a lot of big plays recently. And I think also on the flip side, we've seen Baltimore, their offense is starting to get those explosive plays. We're starting to see a little bit of the connection of Odell. He's been going off recently. Same with Zay Flowers, though, as well. And we know that Keaton Mitchell, they're still kind of involving him, but he could be, a very good spark plug for them. And they still have, Mr. Lamar Jackson back there. So they're still going to be as dynamic as ever. And then, for Jacksonville's offense, it's been, as you alluded to, up and down this year. And especially going up against a very tough defense with their quarterback who's dealing with a pretty severe ankle injury. So he's probably not going to be as, mobile and be able to extend plays as he usually is. And their offensive line's been kind of a little bit iffy this year. Just feels like a really bad recipe for the Jaguars. So that's why I'm extremely confident in Baltimore along with you that they'll pull off the win and cover that 3.5 points. Once again, John putting 100 standard bet on the Ravens to cover. I'm putting 140 on them to cover the 3.5 points. So let's move on over to the Monday Nighter, last but not least, as it is the Philadelphia Eagles. They are favored by 3.5 points going to Seattle. Seattle, we mentioned, Seattle's one of those teams that are kind of hanging on right now, trying on the outside looking in, as they are 6-7 for that wild card race, and obviously Philly's going to want to. They're pretty much in the playoffs, but they're jockeying for position at this point, and probably confidence, since, as you mentioned, they have a lack of identity on offense. Nonetheless, who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to go with Philadelphia. Fun fact, Philly has not beaten Seattle in 15 years, which is kind of crazy. But when you think about it also, like, logically, because they haven't played since 2020, a lot of that point was like Seattle with the, like
Russell
prime
Wilson.
Seattle, like Legion of Boom, Russell Wilson. And that's a lot of the times they played. And then sort of the like late 2000s was kind of the like end of the Donovan McNabb era, kind of transition to Vic. And Seattle was still like pretty feisty during those years, like Hasselback. So it made sense. But when I first heard it, I was like, wow, 15 years is pretty crazy. But then when you think about it, it makes sense. I think Philly gets that off their back. I think they're going to get the win here. They're the far superior team. Seattle is certainly very competitive, but they've just kind of been beaten down over the last few weeks with Dallas, with San Francisco, multiple times, by the way, by San Francisco, that I feel like the blueprint is kind of there for Philly. And the Eagles are in a situation where this is the hardest game they're going to have remaining, and I think they know that. Obviously, you don't want to sleep on any opponent, but if there's any game that they're going to, I feel like, really show up, it's going to be this one on their schedule because they need to rise to the occasion. They've lost 2 straight in pretty bad fashion. They don't have the toughest of schedules moving forward with the Giants, the Cardinals, some of these kind of teams after Seattle, and Dallas is like right behind them. If they drop a game and Dallas is that puts Dallas in a position basically, which they'll know if Dallas had already beaten Buffalo by this point. But if they drop a game, they've put themselves in a position where Dallas could potentially take the division and maybe even the first seed. And I don't think they want that to happen. They want to control their own destiny, and they have the talent differential. They have a lot of things. I think the problems have been exposed. Now it's time. Let's fix them. Let's go out. Let's get back on track. I think that's what they're going to do. So I'm putting 100 on them.
I'm with you. I think this for Phillies is a get right kind of game. Seattle is talented, but like we mentioned before, really simplistic, and so is Philly. But especially in regards to offensive and defensive line play, I think that's where Philly obviously has the advantage. I would suspect Philadelphia to be more run heavy. I feel like they've kind of gotten away from that. I mean, they have one of the better offensive lines in the league, and they've kind of strayed away from their run game. So I won't be surprised if that's an emphasis for them. For Seattle, I'm actually going to check right now. Are we getting Geno Smith or Drew Lock? I mean, not that it matters too much, but regardless, especially if it's Drew Lock, man, it feels like this wants to get due for a turnover or two. But regardless,
I feel like that's kind of huge though, because Philly is just not a defense that you're going to want to turn the ball over to, because it's just going to get real scary.
But regardless, I've mentioned before, Seattle's offense is just way too simplistic, way too reliant upon, hey, DK Metcalf, just go beat your guy, even though, we're not going to schematically, put you in an advantage. You got to create the advantage yourself. And as good as he is, Philly's still talented, especially in regards to, we mentioned the front 7 or front 4 really, and their corners are still solid. So I think they'll pose some issues for Seattle, obviously. So I'm putting 150 on the Eagles to cover that 3.5 point spread. John is in agreement in regards to Philadelphia, but he is only putting 100 standard bet on the Eagles to cover here. So those are our picks and bets against the spread for Week 15. We have 6 differences, so we'll see how that, if any of us make some traction in regards to just pure record-wise, and obviously money-wise. Both of us putting a lot of money on the Rams, so that's obviously the huge game. And I guess difference-wise, would it be Dallas? I think Dallas and Buffalo is the biggest discrepancy, as you put 200 and I put 90 on the Bills. So we'll see what happens there. But like I mentioned, once again, there's going to be games Thursday, obviously, but also Saturday. There's those 3 games on Saturday as well. Although, who knows if there'll be great product games. I mean, maybe Detroit, Denver, but I don't know about Indy, Pittsburgh. I'll still watch them. It's on Saturday, but I don't know. But nonetheless, as always, feel free to rate, review, comments. Is there anything else you want to mention or throw out there before we call it?
If you've entered your fantasy playoffs, I hope you got better luck than me currently, because man, the Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert injuries really got me feeling very worried. I'm in a situation where like my options are Hollywood Brown, Chris Godwin, or Jacoby Myers as my replacement, and none of them have been good as of late.
Yeah,
So
it's playoff time, so you want to
scary.
you kind of want to start the people that are reliable, like liabilities. You usually think of fantasy, as I learned last week. Because last week I strayed away from my 4 running back lineup because I didn't think Brees Hall, and then Brees Hall had a really good game, and that's unfortunate. So. Yeah, then I saw I beat you out for Joe Flacco on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I literally at first I had it for 0 on the fob, and then I was like, maybe somebody throws like 5 or 10, so I put 15, and I wake up and I see you got him. I was like, you put 20, and I thought about it, but then I was like going like 20, 30, 40, like something crazy just because I have a ton of fob left.
So
I was like, nah, I don't feel like anybody else is gonna go Flacco, and then I forgot that CJ Stroud had the concussion. Because I was thinking, the only thing I was thinking was the Herbert injury. I was like, that only affects me. And so, yeah.
Tough, yeah.
It's okay, though. You need him more than me if Stroud does get out. Because for me, he was just depth. I still have Kyler and Dak.
Yeah, so it was just like a third. Yeah, because, I don't have any depth after Dorian Thompson-Robinson supposed to be my depth. And then obviously Flacco overtook him for the job. So,
yeah,
I guess I have that insurance. But, no more bye weeks going forward. So, very interesting. And, yeah, like John mentioned, best of luck unless you're going against me in fantasy or John. But yeah, once again, there are Saturday games too, so just note that in regards to your lineups and such. But if that will do it for John and myself. Like I mentioned, please rate, review, comments as always, and we'll be back next week to share our thoughts and reactions to Week 15. NBA pods coming soon, maybe around New Year's, that time where I don't know, we'll see, or afterwards. Probably once, like we mentioned, once NFL playoffs probably start, we'll maybe do it because then we're only going to be talking about 8 games at most, and then at 6, and then dwindles down per week, as opposed to like this week where we had to pick 16 games, and then we're going to have to talk about 16 games the following week. So,